Welcome back to the New England Endurance Podcast. I'm your host, Art Trapozis, and today's episode is a treat for the mountain bikers up there, or anybody who's pedaled the dirt in Vermont or dreamed of pedaling it. You're going to enjoy this episode. First of all, raise your hand if you've heard of the Velomont Trail or the Velomont Project, shall I say. This project came up in one of our previous episodes here on the podcast, and I was like, what is this all about? So it's basically a project between, from what I understand, and we'll learn about it today, it's a project between the Vermont Huts and Trails Organization and the Vermont Mountain Biking Association for a multi-use hut-supported mountain bike trail system that's literally running the length of Vermont. So that's 485 miles of trails connecting 23 Vermont mountain biking chapters across the state. I think it's on public and private lands, which is pretty incredible. And joining me right now for the podcast is RJ Thompson. He's the executive director of Vermont Huts and Trails. It's a nonprofit that is spearheading this vision. And we're going to get into how this project started, who's funding it, whose crazy idea this was, the collaborations behind it, what it's going to mean for the future of mountain biking and endurance sports in Vermont. So welcome, RJ, to the podcast.
Thanks, Art. Nice to meet you. Glad to be here.
Great to meet you as well. So let's start with the Velomont itself. Like, what is this thing? Why should mountain bikers be excited about it?
Well, you did a great job introducing the project. The Velomont is going to be, what the long trail is for hikers and what the Catamount Trail is for skiers up here in Vermont. Those are end-to-end long distance trails, but this one, the Velomont, will be for mountain biking. So it's a multi-use trail that is optimized for mountain biking.
That's awesome. That's a great analogy between the long trail and the Catamount. I didn't know the connection there. That's really cool.
You'll also be able, for folks who are hikers or runners, you'll have another option to traverse the state north to south as well. But the trail is being constructed to mountain bike standards. And in fact, most of the trail, in particular, new sections or sections that we're improving, we are going to be building to make it adaptive friendly. So
awesome.
They'll also have the opportunity for adaptive cyclists to use a good majority of the new trail segments.
That is fascinating. So I just returned from a few days up at the Velomont Loop. It's called the Heart of the Greens Loop, which is part of the Velomont. And it's a 40-mile section of trail. It's a loop. I believe we started in Rochester, Vermont, about 5,000 to 6,000 feet of climbing. It was absolutely stunning. We stayed at the Chittenbrook Hut overnight, which was about halfway through the trail. I got to ask you about this trail that we took back into Rochester, and I really want folks to kind of get a feel for where I'm going with this. So there's this trail. It must have 100 switchbacks, I've heard. It's called the Tunnel Ridge Trail. I think it rivals, and don't be upset with me, Kingdom Trails, but it rivals the Black Bear Trail at Kingdom Trails, which is rated like one of the top 3 trails in the world. This thing was incredible. It's basically like a 1,500-foot descent back into town. I mean, how long did it take you to build that trail? Just that piece of the trail.
Well, I did not build it personally. We have a professional trail builders built that, and Angus McCusker, our Velomont Trail Director, would be able to answer that question more directly. But it is a beast of a descent or a climb if you're coming at it from the other direction.
Yeah.
But we do recommend riding it in the direction that you did. It sounds like you went clockwise.
Yes.
Out of town there. Yeah. You get some of that double track out of the way early on, and then it's really fun and beautiful, mostly single track there on out. Yeah, it is very unique, especially here in Vermont, to have such a significant descent, and also one that has incredible vistas along the way. To have that on a mountain bike is very unique here, not just in Vermont, but on the East Coast in general.
Yeah, I mean, just the smoothness. It felt very, if you don't mind me saying, KT-ish in terms of just how amazing it flowed. And I'm like, oh, wow, if the Velomont is going to have sections like this, man, this is going to be incredible.
Well, it's a good, analogy there. And what's cool about the Velomont Trail is that we have a trail committee that reviews, kind of design specs and where things will be going. But in areas where it makes sense to have, terrain like that, and or where the terrain exists like that, the trail being relatively close to the town of Rochester in a populated area, you want to make sure that that trail can handle that amount of traffic. Now, in more remote parts of the state where you're connecting from A to B and it might not see that amount of traffic, the trail might have a more primitive feel. So there's going
Okay.
to be a little bit of something for everyone on the Velomont.
Nice. So let's take it back a little bit. So how did the Vermont Hut and Trails get started? Like, how did the vision grow from huts to a full trail and hut network? Was there some sort of aha moment where you thought, we could connect this thing statewide?
Yeah, so we're Vermont Huts and Trails is just a little over 9 years old now, and I co-founded that with a guy named Devin Littlefield, who's since moved on to greener pastures, or maybe not, maybe less green, because this is about as green as it gets, working in an outdoor nonprofit. But originally the concept was, let's create a 4-season hut network here in Vermont, linking mountain bikers and skiers and hikers, and trying to figure out strategic locations where these huts could be located in a way that made sense for year-round connectivity. And so that led us to chatting with a number of land managers, stakeholders, and other nonprofit organizations who are now partners in this project. Some of those key stakeholders and partners are chapters, or back then were chapters and still are chapters, of the Vermont Mountain Bike Association. And so we started saying, hey guys, like, we're thinking about maybe locating a hut over here. It's kind of, close to the Catamount Trail. We've worked closely with them from the start, and it looks like, it could be close to one of your network's trails. Have you all thought about a location where it might make sense to have a hut or an accommodation overnight? Those early conversations linked us up with Angus McCusker, who had started, I think, maybe a year prior with Ridgeline Outdoor Collective, who is a
Mm-hmm.
local Vimba chapter down there in Rochester. His, at the time, he was the executive director of Ridgeline Outdoor, and so we all were talking about how could we piece together, a few chapters, a few Vimba chapters, and connect them, and then have a couple of huts along the way. And that kind of grew a little bit to connecting the towns between Killington and Stowe,
Mm-hmm.
because those two resort towns, as they are, have a ton of recreational assets and trail connectivity, and a lot of engagement with their membership. So early on, it was really kind of limited to Ridgeline / Rochester. Back then, there was Green Mountain Trails, which is in Pittsfield, where you pass through Ridgeline, and then Mad River Riders, WADA, the Waterbury Area Trails Alliance, and Stowe Mountain Bike Club at the time, now Stowe Trails Partnership. And, we started looking at maps and drawing lines and thinking about where things could go. And we started having meetings with Forest Parks and Recreation, and then the U.S. Forest Service. And at some point in time, not long after the first couple of meetings, the state of Vermont said, well, I think it was someone up in the Northeast Kingdom, and said, well, why aren't you coming all the way up to us? Like, why not connect it? Why not connect to us? We kind of like, well, this is a pretty damn big project as it is, just to get from like Killington to Stowe. There's a lot of big gaps. But that's how it evolved, honestly, organically. And then at some point we're like, well, if we're going up to the kingdom, then we might as well just connect down to Massachusetts. And so that's honestly how the Velomont Trail itself organically grew. As far as the huts, Vermont Huts, we were Vermont Huts Association up until last year. We became Vermont Huts and Trails to more accurately reflect the fact that the Velomont is our keystone project that we're spearheading, and now are also working more directly with Vimba to move the project forward. And on the hut side, we really wanted to make sure our focus was year round, and recognizing here in Vermont that unfortunately our winters, are kind of getting a little more volatile and unfortunately shorter. So it
Mm-hmm.
made sense for the huts to also accommodate bikers and hikers as well. So honestly, it was just a really, really great partnership across multiple stakeholders. And we were, as we grew, we kind of became positioned well enough to kind of lead the project and move it forward.
Okay, I have a ton of questions here. Is it your vision that mountain bikers would sort of set up camp at one of these huts and then do loops around it, or are you thinking more of like bike packing from hut to hut?
Yeah, both for sure. I mean, right now you rode the Heart of the Greens loop, and that is a great option for folks who, maybe just have a night or two to get out there. And a lot of people will do that loop in one big day. But if you want to enjoy it and spend some time in Vermont, we recommend,
Yeah.
spending the night at one of the huts. But what we're doing is creating the end-to-end experience that will have about 30 to 45 huts or hostels along the way so that you can truly have a big adventure in Vermont and bike pack your way north or south
Wow.
across the state.
How many huts exist now?
I think we have, I should know, but we kind of have been adding them pretty frequently, but I think we're up to 15 or 16 huts in our network. And those are comprised of two huts that we own and operate. You stayed at one, the Chittenden Brook Hut. The other one is the Grout Pond Hut in
Uh-huh.
southern Vermont that is also going to be along the Velomont Trail. And then the others are a partner hut operator. So those are kind of mom and pop run entities, and then also a few nonprofit partners that are also in our network. And so we may engage with just the booking and reservations, and then the communications to the guests. And then those private operators generally tend to handle all the operating stuff in the field. So it's a good
Okay.
partnership that helps us grow the network, increase access to the outdoors, and make it more available to more folks as we add those locations.
Nice. And just so folks know, at least my experience at the Chittenbrook Hut was we showed up, there were beds, there were pots and pans. We had to basically boil our own water or filter it and bring our sleeping bag, but there was heat, there were lights. We did bring some food that we could cook up on the stove. So it's not super duper rustic. It's definitely, we were warm, we were cozy. And it felt like, we were at home at times. So is that how you envision sort of the other huts being not super minimalist, but having some accommodations?
Yeah, the Chittenden Brook Hut was the first hut that we built, and that is the vision for all new huts. They'll be built to modern day, energy efficiency standards here in Vermont. They're all off grid. Um, they're not like you're not going to see like a TV or Wi-Fi or anything in there, as you know. But
Yeah.
you're going to have what you need to cook a meal and to sleep comfortably for the evening. Just bring your sleeping bag and food is what we tell folks. And some of our partner huts some are a little more rustic. One of them is actually a little more fancy. But any future huts that we build and that we operate will kind of hit that benchmark that you saw at Chittenden Brook Hut. Grout Pond Hut is a different design, but has the same amenities that you found in Chittenden Brook
Nice.
Hut.
My only complaint would be I'd love to have a little bit of Wi-Fi just so I could upload my Strava.
Well, it's if you can find service. It's getting a little better here in Vermont, but yeah, there's not much service back there at Chittenden Brook Hut. And when you go into town, that's honestly one of the coolest things about the Velomont Trail is that, the Long Trail and the Catamount Trail tend to stay very much in the backcountry for most of their distance. And the Velomont has been intentionally routed into Vermont's rural towns and villages to bring folks out of the forest into those towns, allow them an opportunity to grab a sandwich at a cafe, grab a coffee,
A
get a
creamy.
beer, get a creamy for sure. Ample creamies here in Vermont. I think I had at least 3 or 4 dozen this summer. Probably not a lot, not enough actually. There's never too many. And
Okay, so
yeah,
let's say
get
you
into
wanted.
town. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's say you have a vision, you have the vision to build out these other huts. Like who's paying for this? Where are you getting the funding?
Yeah. So right now we received what's called a congressionally directed spending requests, which in prior years were known as earmarks. And we submitted a request through former Senator Leahy's office, and we're forever grateful for Senator Leahy and the work he's done here in Vermont. And we were lucky enough to succeed in two of those requests. So we submitted one request for trail construction. Those funds are limited to construction on federal land. So we will be spending a large majority of that down over the next 2 to 3 years. And then we also have another grant for the construction of huts and hostels on federal, state, or private land. So we do not have all the money for the entire trail. We have a good chunk of the money for like phase one of the trail, but not all of it.
Okay.
And so it will require multiple other funding sources. Over the years, we also have received some state funding through what's called the RTP, Rec Trails Program here in Vermont, for other smaller segments of the trail, and foundational grants. Of course, our members and private donors and a little bit of hut revenue, rental revenue can go into the trail construction as well. But we will be fundraising for the next 10 to 20 years to complete this project. Unless, right now we're not at a time, literally the federal government just shut down overnight.
I know.
We're not at a time where we expect any massive, investments in outdoor rec in the next few years, but you never know.
Unfortunately. Yeah. So I'd like to give a shout out to, because you can't do this alone, right? You're building a 400 plus mile trail. Like, I'd love to give a shout out for you to mention some of your partners. We stumbled across a partner when we came out of the green of the heart of the Greens Loop. We bumped into a couple of folks from this group. You mentioned Ridgeline Outdoor Collective as a local chapter. Like, who are some of your other key partners besides Vemba and this Ridgeline group?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, the trail, the Velomont, kind of grew out of Rochester, out of Ridgeline Outdoor Collective. Angus McCusker is a Rochester local there, so you got to give him a bunch of credit and the organization in that area for really working with the U.S. Forest Service. Like, without that core group of locals and the awesome staff at the U.S. Forest Service, like Holly Knox, Chris Matrick, in that zone, you don't end up with the great recreational assets that exist there and existed there prior to this project really taking shape. So big hats off to that crew and that particular chapter of Vimba. And really, like I said at the top of the call, the project really is a massive collaborative effort among, of course, Vermont Huts and Trails, but then the Vimba chapters through which the trail is passing or will pass, the U.S. Forest Service, Vermont Forest Parks and Recreation, the Catamount Trail. The trail is co-located really a lot of the southern segment of the trail from like south of Grout Pond with the Catamount Trail. So
interesting.
In
they overlap?
Part, yeah, there's some good co-location down there. There will be some more like in probably toward the central northern part of the state a little bit, which is nice. You have a trail. It benefits the skiers in the winter. Having the tread improved for summer use means that in the winter you won't have the melt out as quickly because it's not getting wet. And so all of those organizations have a ton of volunteers as well. So in Vermont, recreation really just is carried on the shoulders and backs of volunteers, and I think a lot of people miss that or are just not aware of that. And so when you ask like, how is this getting paid for? Yes, like professionally built trail costs thousands and thousands of dollars. Really, we're talking millions here. And volunteers also contribute thousands and thousands of dollars worth of their work. And that needs to be known because folks who come and play here in Vermont and recreate and appreciate that stuff may not be aware of that or may not be aware of the cost of building and maintaining this infrastructure. So if there's one thing that, I'd put out there is like, if you're coming to Vermont and you're playing on some of these trails, find a time to come and volunteer one day or spend a couple hours during your trip, lean in, talk to the local chapter, see if there's a trail work day. And if not, then make sure you're at least a member. And if you're not a member, maybe donate, 20, 30, 40, $50 because it's way cheaper than a lift ticket at a ski resort.
Yeah.
We're not big corporations that are building this infrastructure out.
No, and we had so much gratitude when we finished the loop. We're like, oh my God, how much work went into this? It just, you could feel the love that went into that trail building. I mean, are you guys running into any obstacles with any local towns or anything like that with this project?
And just to back up before I answer that, the trail builders obviously are the ones who are out there doing the work, and they do such good work regardless of the conditions out there. Like this summer has been extremely dry, and while that's also great for recreating outdoor, it can become challenging when you're trying to, form a berm and you're just like working with moon dust. And on the flip side, we've also had floods. So like again, hats off to the builders who are out there doing the work. As far as
Yes, indeed.
opposition, I would say that in large part, no. Like, there's no town that we've worked with that's like, stay away. Like, we went through a vision plan a year and a half ago to really do public engagement and chat with locals and get feedback from them. Um, occasionally during public comment periods, you're always going to have someone who's concerned with um, im- um, impact to the lands. We go through a very vigorous review process with the U.S. Forest Service for those trail segments on federal land. Same thing on state lands. So these are very well thought out and intentional trail alignments that are being made. So it goes through reviews at various levels. And we do listen, like if there's a landowner who has concerns with the proximity of the trail, we do everything we can to realign and find a slightly different route to, provide an even greater buffer from
That's
their
the way to
property.
do it, man. That's awesome. You mentioned the U.S. Forest Service. Did I read something that they unlocked this, I don't know, 70 miles of trail in the Manchester district for you?
Yeah, unlocked. Yeah, that's great. I love that.
Well, okay, whatever. I
They
don't
had
know
a
what the
Matt.
term is,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I like that. I wish it was that. No, yes. So I'm glad you brought it up. The Manchester district recently approved just north of 70 miles of new or improved Velomont trail. So that's huge.
nice. So you have to build that?
We will have to build that. Yep.
Okay.
there,
Yep.
there's going to be and some of that will be co-located, like I said, with the Catamount Trail. But in large part, we'll have to build some new segments and improve some existing trail that's already out there, but is not yet suitable for mountain biking. So we'll have to do that. But that's pretty.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. It's very significant. Years, and honestly, from scoping to decision, which is kind of the unlocking that you mentioned there. Like the turnaround there was, I want to say, 3 years maybe. It wasn't horrible, honestly. A little over 3 maybe
Yeah.
for that amount of review. Like, I mean, again, like hats off to the Forest Service and the Manchester District team for really working with us and other locals on the ground to not only just align the corridor, but also review it. So we're talking about species, habitat, archaeological review to make sure that we're not disturbing any indigenous sites. So that was a big approval for us that we received this past summer, a month or two ago. And then similarly up in Rochester, the Telephone Gap Integrated Resource Project gives the green light for a little over 30 more miles of trail up there. So we'll be able to connect. We're planning to connect. Next year, we'll start construction to continue south from getting off of the heart of the Greens Loop to continue south toward Mendon and extend the Velomont in that direction
That's
as well.
awesome. What's the easiest way for someone to get a snapshot of what trails already exist to ride on for the Velomont? Is that through your website?
Yeah, it'd be on our site. We're pretty close to rolling out kind of I wouldn't call it a planner map, but it's more of like an exploratory map that will show you what's out there, what's in the works.
Oh,
It's
that's fantastic.
interactive. It'll show you the huts along the way and other places and kind of other points of interest, if you will. So that
Very
should be.
cool.
We were hoping to have that out a while ago, but there's some limitation with ArcGIS and what we want to see on there and what we don't want to see on there. So we'll have to wait a little bit. But I think by the end of this month or into November, we should have, definitely by next bike season.
That's awesome. And I think what might make sense is have a little icon that has sort of your nearest creamy stop.
We should definitely put that. We'll have to do some research to get those POIs, and I'd be happy to volunteer to go and get those for us.
Okay, so when we popped out of the Velomont Trail, we bumped into two gentlemen who were part of the Ridgeline group, I believe, and shout out to them. They were on e-mountain bikes.
Mhm.
And I was very jealous because there was quite a bit of climbing to get to that trail I mentioned. So do you envision the entire trail network being e-bike friendly? And are there any restrictions on what type of e-bikes?
So e-bikes are obviously being considered across a number of different trail networks here in Vermont. And when that answer is very nuanced, it's going to be not only chapter specific, but also landowner specific and land manager
Okay.
specific. I don't think we're at a point in time where we can apply a broad stroke and say, e-bikes are welcome on the entire Velomont. That's not where we're at yet. I personally don't really have an opinion. I think e-bikes are a tremendous tool for folks to get out there, cover big distances.
Uh-huh.
And folks who are either, aging out of or maybe have some other physical limitation for, your standard bicycle. But we're not the decision makers when it comes to what type of bicycle is allowed on a specific section of trail.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. That said, of course, adaptive cycles are welcome on the Velomont, and those adaptive bikes obviously have an assist mechanism, and that's amazing because it allows those
Uh-huh.
folks to get out and experience the trail just like a standard bike would. So
Yeah. That's cool. When you piece all this together, right? You've got sort of three components. You've got the regulatory piece, you've got the financial piece, you've got the community to deal with. Like, what's been sort of your biggest struggle? Is it mostly the financial to kind of get this thing going, or is it about getting approval from U.S. Forestry?
none of it is easy, I guess, is what I would say. But we're getting the access, so it's access and funding, right? Those are really the two critical elements to make the sauce. And we're getting a fair amount of access permission right now on federal lands, and our staff has been working really hard to identify the gaps between public lands and work with private landowners to make those connections. I think the funding is really going to be the challenge now heading into the
Mm-hmm.
next 2-3 years. We still need to match. So that federal grant I mentioned earlier, we have to come up with
What's a
20%
matching?
match.
Okay.
Yep. On the federal grants. It's a $2.5 million grant. We've spent down about, I don't know, I had to look back recently, but we probably have around 1.75 million remaining, and we need to continue to fundraise for that match. So we've met about half of our match, so we need another 250K in
Okay.
match for that grant. And going forward, like I said, we'll have more trail mileage approved than we can actually pay for. So we have to continue to go well beyond that 2.5 million. I mean, trails are expensive. This is like,
Yeah.
$40,000 to $50,000 a mile.
Well, interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
When you put it that way, geez, I just rode 40 miles.
Do the math. Yeah.
I mean, listen, so you've been here, I can't remember, do you say 5 years or 9 years?
9 years. Yeah. A little over 9 years. Yeah.
So if you could start all over again, is there something you would do differently from the beginning?
That's an interesting question. No, I think we're doing it all perfectly. No, just kidding. I would have, for myself personally, I would have set more realistic expectations, I think, for myself. But because I was, like early 30s, and whatever, wanted to just get things done quickly, I had these super ambitious timelines. And I think now I've just learned to be patient about it. And so I don't know if I would have
A
done
little more
things
patient.
differently, but would have just said, okay, things are going to take longer.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so kind of winding down our conversation, what should we envision the next 1 to 2 years coming out of the Vermont Hut and Trail Organization? Should we see another few huts being built, or another batch of trails we might want to scope out?
But yeah, we are working right now, hoping to start renovations on a hostel in Randolph, Vermont, which is on the other side of the range where the heart of the Greens Loop is. We are also waiting on a decision for a new hut in the backcountry called the South Pond Hut. That was just out for public comment. We hope to get that decision this month, sometime in October. We'll see how the shutdown affects that timeline. Like I said, you got to be patient. And we're also working with the state of Vermont to restore a historical building up in Waterbury, Vermont. And that building will be a deconstruction and reconstruction to turn an old kind of farmhouse that was in the 1800s into a hut. So new structures, absolutely. More connectivity, absolutely, all within the next 2 to 3 years. And we're also going to be growing our forest program, which is an acronym for fostering outdoor recreation, education, sustainability, and teamwork.
I love it.
Yeah. So what that does is that's honestly one of the coolest things that, besides the infrastructure that we're building, is.
Yeah. Tell me more. What is this?
This program brings folks who might not otherwise have the means or resources to get outside, and brings them into our huts and onto the trails completely free of charge. So we work with schools, teen centers, Vermont Adaptive Ski and Sports. They're another great partner of ours. And we create programming that provides them with some education and gives them some life skills and kind of backcountry education. And that program started just before COVID. So it's, I don't know, 5 or 6 years old now. And we're about to hire a half-time person to really now lead that and grow that even more. So very excited by that. Now that we have more trail miles and more hut infrastructure, we can continue to grow that programming. And, honestly, it just fulfills our mission to create an enriching and immersive outdoor experience for everyone.
I love that you guys are doing that. And thanks for mentioning that on this podcast, because I would not have been aware of that.
Yeah.
So for folks, just kind of wrapping up here, for folks who are listening and want to support, you mentioned they can reach out to a local chapter and volunteer their time find out when the trail building days are. On your website, I think we can become a member, or if we don't want to become a member, we can just do sort of a one-time donation. Would you add anything to that on how we can support you?
Yeah, we have. So there's those opportunities. We also have a recurring monthly, become a monthly member, similar to what you might hear all the time on NPR or VPR, your local public radio. We have a monthly membership. You can do, as little as $5 a month. That's a great way to become a sustaining Vermont Hudson Trails member. And that all gets poured back into the infrastructure that you'll be able to ride or stay in. And yeah, definitely at a minimum, if you want to, please sign up for our newsletter and look for ways to volunteer and just get engaged. We're a pretty fun organization, and we work with a lot of great other partners like Vimba and Catamount Trail, Vermont Adaptive. We're all out here kind of, carrying our respective torches, but every now and then, we come together and we do these really, really ambitious projects. So it's just fun to be a part of it with all of those folks.
Awesome. And I forgot to ask, so does your organization actually have an office or a building where you all show up to, and where is that located?
We sure do. There's 7 of us. Our Waterbury, Vermont office is right across from the park that's downtown, and you're welcome to come say hello if you want to get in touch with us.
Okay, last question. What's your favorite trail in all of New England to mountain bike on?
Oh my goodness, there's so many.
Or favorite area?
Oh. It's so hard. I guess the favorite trail. Okay, here I'll be generic about it. Favorite trail to ride in New England is the one that I can ride with my son, who is 6.5. So whatever that trail may be, if he's on it with me and he's able to stay on his bike and pedal, then I'm having a great time.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. That's a great answer.
Yeah.
RJ, thank you so much for sharing the story about the Vermont Hut and Trail Organization and sharing us with this whole project around the Velomont. It's super exciting. I can't wait to ride more of it. If you want to learn more about the Vermont Huts and Trails, go to vermonthuts.org, or you can find them on Instagram and I believe Facebook at Vermont Huts, and we will tag them on our Instagram at New England Endurance. So thank you, RJ, for joining us today. It was awesome to have you.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat.
Cool. And thanks everybody for listening to the show today. Until next time, get out there, keep pushing your limits, try this Heart of the Greens loop in Rochester, Vermont, and enjoy the beautiful terrain of New England. Thank you.